They were paying something like £3 an hour. And I was like, amazing, sign me up. So I went and did that for probably 2 weeks. And after doing that, I got this taste of freedom, taste of earning my own money. And I was like, sign me up for more.
Sarah, I am so privileged, honestly, to have you on the show today. So thank you so much for being here. So just quickly, for those people who don't know you, just tell everyone a little bit about who you are.
Well, thank you so much for having me on here. It feels like a real privilege to have been asked. So thank you, Candice. I am Sarah Nicholls. I am trained as a medical doctor. And in more recent years, I have retrained as a life coach. And I now help healthcare professionals get out of burnout and stay out of it. So that's a very brief introduction to me.
Yes, yes, but I think it sums it up really nicely. So, and such a
Thank you.
good thing to be doing. So, actually, one of my business besties is a nurse and, tries to help people find the joy in their work again. So, very, very similar. So, I really resonate with your messaging. All right. So, my favorite part of the show is to travel back in time and visit young you. Where did you start? Like, I always love to know that first job where you got that little taste of independence. Like, some people were 9, some people were 20, but yeah, where did it start for you?
Oh, I was desperate to start work when I was younger. So my first job was when I was 13, and I grew up in a little village in the countryside, and there was a plant nursery down the road that was owned by one of our family friends, and they needed some help packing these Easter gift baskets with flowers, and it was just a little temporary job, and they were paying something like £3 an hour, and I was like, amazing, sign me up. So I went and did that for probably 2 weeks, and after doing that, I got this taste of freedom, taste of earning my own money. And I was like, sign me up for more. How can I work more? So that family that owned the plant nursery actually ended up hiring me as a babysitter for their children. They had 4 kids, and the mum of the family used to go out on a Sunday she needed to run errands and just do things for the household. So they got me to come in every Sunday, I think for 3 or 4 hours. The dad was around, he was working in the plant nursery that was attached to the house, and I would look after the kids. So that was my first job. Um, and I loved it. I loved the job. I loved the money I earned. It was fantastic, and I had many other part-time jobs following on from there. But that was my very first taste of freedom.
Nice. Did they pay you also £3 an hour for babysitting 4 children?
I think they might have upped it a little bit, and they
Okay.
were very kind to me. They uh,
Yeah.
they gave me lots of other lovely perks as well. They'd always feed me nice food, and they bought me birthday gifts and things like that. They
Oh,
were
wow.
lovely family, really
Oh.
special.
Oh, that's wonderful. What a lovely first job where you just
Yeah, it was very
treated like
wholesome.
gold.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And then went on to work in various other places. I remember I worked at McDonald's at one point, as I think a lot of teenagers do. And I was really driven when I was younger to earn money to be able to go and do fun things. I suppose like lots of teenagers are. And I remember my mum sort of saying to me, if you want X, Y, Z, just go and earn some extra money. Just you got to work for it. So, for example, when I was I think 17, and I was just about getting old enough to go on a holiday with my friends, I was like, I'm going to get another part-time job. So I signed up to as many jobs as I could to earn the money to take myself away.
And you did. You made it.
And I did.
Yeah,
And
yes,
I did.
yes.
And I think that's one of the that was where I started to learn this lesson that, like, the harder you work, the better things get,
Okay.
which I might have had to unlearn a little bit as
Yes,
I got
yes.
older. But
I'm
that
just
was
about to
that was
say we need to revisit that probably later in the show.
yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So the harder you work, the easier things get. Yes. And I suppose
Mm.
that is true for a bit, for a period, for a season in your career. But yeah, we'll get to that because
We'll
that's
come
an
back to
important
that.
like pin. All right. So and then so that was all through high school, right?
Yeah, so that was all through high school. And I went to a school that was about 40 miles away from where we lived. So I had this kind of busy schedule where I was working, commuting to school, trying to do as much as I could. And all my friends lived really far away. So if I wanted to see them, I had to travel. And so from quite a young age, my life was very, very, very full.
Mm,
And it was busy, but in good ways. But I think that I carried that lesson through with me as I got older, and felt like life had to be this kind of hamster wheel of busyness, rushing, always doing things, always working harder to achieve the next thing.
mhm, mhm. Ooh, do I resonate with that? I think
Mm,
I still have to do some unlearning over there. So,
I bet a lot of your
but
listeners do
let's
as
not
well.
go down that rabbit hole. Okay, so high school, college, so all these jobs and all this busyness and all of this stuff, was there ever a moment where you thought, oh, I'm just too tired, or I just don't want to do something? Did you feel a little bit of that at that young age, or did it take time to learn that?
I think when I was younger, it seemed fine. I was just, I was happy. I was able to push through. It was all. There was short term gratification. I worked hard, I got paid, and then I would buy the things I wanted. So it was like this, instant gratification, really. Um, as I went through university, I did 2 university courses. So I was at university for 7 years, and in my first university course, I had a part-time job in a bar. That was really fun. It was really sociable. I loved it. Like a ready-made friend group. It was wonderful. And then when I went to go and do my second degree, which was my medical degree, I actually didn't want to work anymore. What I really wanted to do was pour everything into medicine and just focus. I really wanted to have this first time in my life where I could just do this one thing, do it really well. But and I know you like to ask your guests about mistakes, and maybe this can be one of my first mistakes that I mention on here because there will be many. One of the mistakes I made before I applied to medical school is I made a misjudgment about my finances, and I thought that I was going to be eligible for this particular loan before I got into medical school, and that you weren't allowed to apply for the loan very far in advance. And when I came to apply to get this money, they told me you can't have it. There's no exceptions. And so I was like, oh my god, I'm thousands short for medical school. So I really am going to have to work. Um, and I had a part-time job at that point as a healthcare assistant, and I was on a 0 hours contract. So I was able to pick and choose my shifts. And I started medical school. I did like an accelerated medical school program. In the UK, it's called graduate entry medicine. It's where the 5 years are condensed into four. And your first 2 years condensed into one. So that first year is really, really tough.
Mhm.
And I was working 5 days a week doing graduate entry medicine with all the extra stuff that comes with that. It is a full time course. And then at the weekends, I was working 2 12-hour shifts to be able to just pay my university fees. And I do remember I got to a point where I was, I was having to have conversation with the university because I'd like missed a payment, or I'd had a late payment or something along those lines. And they were like, basically, I thought I was going to get kicked out of medical school, which was really scary because this was something I'd wanted for forever. And at that point, I do remember thinking, this is too much. Um, and yeah, that led on to me making some other decisions and basically changing lots of things in my life. But that was definitely a point where I felt I can't keep doing this.
Mm, mm. Oh, I promise you, my stomach's in a knot to have those conversations. That must have been so scary, and you were so young. I mean, obviously, you didn't get kicked out, and you made it. But think back to that time of like, what changes did you have to make this a reality for you? That for you to achieve this dream that you had.
I made a very unconventional change. And I decided that I didn't want to keep working these 2 12-hour shifts every weekend. And so my boyfriend at the time, now husband, said to me, "Why don't you start an online shop? Why don't you try and do something you can do from home?" And I, at the time, I thought that was like completely crazy. I was like, "You want me to add another thing to my plate?" But he helped me to see that if I could learn how to create something digital or something that I could sell online, I could work from home and earn some extra earn some extra cash and not have to keep going and doing all these shifts. So it started out with me creating these like knitted hats, and I was knitting in the evenings and trying to sell those, but they weren't very profitable and they took up a lot of time. And then I had this brainwave, like, hey, I can draw and paint to a reasonable degree. What if I draw or paint some pictures and sell prints of them online? And then it could be like kind of passive income. I make a load of prints, sell them, send them in the post. That's going to be nice and easy. But what ended up happening was I asked a few different friends, "Oh, could you send me pictures of your pets so I can paint those?" Because I thought people like animals. And as I put those online, I made an Etsy shop. People started asking me, "Hey, could you paint my dog? Could you paint my cat?" And instead of selling prints for sort of £10, I actually began selling the original paintings for £100 or more. And suddenly I was in business, and I could quit my part-time job. I didn't have to be a healthcare assistant anymore. I was able to work from home. The dream came true.
Mm.
So all I had to do was medical school in the week, bit of painting at the weekends, and I was good. I could pay my tuition fees. Life was easier. And that was my first taste of entrepreneurship as well, which was pretty exciting.
Yes. Wow, that is such a fascinating story. I did not know this about you. That is so cool. Okay, so you paint people's pets. That is very cool. Well done for, your boyfriend at the time to plant the seed. I love how it grew. That's very cool. All right, so and then that is what got you through. Like you just did that for the wow.
Yeah,
Okay, fascinating. I love that story. Okay, then you qualify, right?
then I qualified.
Yes,
Indeed.
then you qualify. Then everything falls into place. Just,
And life has been a simple dream. Everything's been easy and sunshines and rainbows since then.
so easy, float on clouds. I know it.
Yeah.
Okay, back to reality. So you qualify, you get a job, and now this is when I don't know. To me, I feel like when rubber hits the road, when you get your real I mean, and not that anything else wasn't a real job, but I always feel like that first adult job. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, that first proper job, that real professional job. Yes,
Hmm.
I'd had lots and lots of part-time jobs. And this was like the first time where I had real responsibilities. So I'd wanted to be a doctor for probably a decade. It was just so exciting to finally be walking into the hospital, not as a healthcare assistant, not as a patient, but as a doctor. I was like so proud of myself and so excited. And I really felt invincible. I felt like, oh, I've got experience in healthcare because I'd worked as a healthcare assistant. I'd worked shifts, night shifts, everything. Um, I'd worked in many other part-time jobs, so I felt like I understood people well. I was just like, yeah, this is going to be a dream. I'm so excited to start. And the first few months were really wonderful. I really, really enjoyed my my start of my medical career. Um, and a few months later, what happens when you qualify as a doctor in the UK is you have 2 years where you're rotating around various jobs in different hospitals. You don't get a lot of say about what you do, and the idea is that you get a really varied experience. Um, so that you're quite a well-rounded doctor by the end of that first 2 years, and then you go into specialty training and become a specialist in whatever area of medicine you choose. So my first few months were great. Then things started to go a bit iffy. I started to work. I started a job in a very toxic workplace, where people were talking behind each other's backs. There was a lot of mistrust within the department. It was a really difficult work environment, and I started to notice that that was having an impact on me personally, and I was taking a lot of it home with me. Because I was newly qualified, I was starting to turn that negativity on myself, really. And I started to feel quite low, quite anxious, tired all the time. And I started to question whether I could even continue being a doctor, which was really shocking to me. I had this kind of invincibility feeling, and then suddenly I felt like a shell of my former self. Um, and what I didn't realize at the time was that I was burnt out. The job had really ground me down. It had been several months of this, and at the time, I just thought there's something wrong with me, and I turned it all in on myself. So what happened then is I carried on. I did what I'd always done, and I just pushed harder. I worked harder. As I'd learnt from my younger years, it's not a problem that can't be solved by working harder. If I just keep pushing and proving myself, everything will be fine. Um, and that didn't work very well, as you can imagine. That actually probably made things worse. And I didn't speak up about how I was feeling because I felt like if people think that I'm not coping, they're going to question me as a professional. Surely I should have proved myself by now. Surely people should know that I'm good enough. And if I pipe up and say I'm struggling, they're going to question whether I should even be doing this job. So I kept quiet about it until I got to the end of that first year, when I sheepishly asked some of my colleagues and my peers who were at the same level as me how they were all feeling. And one by one, I realized all of us feel like this. We're all really struggling, and it was like, as I brought it up, it was like this collective sigh of relief from other people being like, "Oh, okay, we're allowed to say this. Like, yeah, this is really hard." And that was when I realized I'm not alone in this, and it's actually probably a system problem. And it took probably another 18 months or so for things to really start to feel better, and I made various changes in my career and my personal life to help me with that. But that was sort of my burnout story, I suppose, in a nutshell. Um, and yeah, I made lots of changes after that.
Yeah. I do want to ask you, so what was the lowest low point there where you felt like, because there's a lot of things coming out for me in this story, which is, okay, you're pushing harder, which is, I think something so many of us learn, um, which is not helping, but then you think it's your problem, more of your problem. Not speaking, being in a toxic work environment where people are speaking badly about each other. Yeah, so what made you, I guess, what made you not speak to your colleagues right from the beginning, where you needed to have time to even feel comfortable to say, like, are you finding this hard? Was it just about people finding out that you struggling? What? Yeah.
Mm, yeah, it's a really good question. So, a couple of things there. So, the reason I didn't speak up was, first of all, in medicine, and I'm sure this is true for so many professions, we had it drilled into us the whole way through our training that you're here to prove yourself. You're here. Medical school is so competitive, and it's all about appearing to be the best and appearing to know everything, unfortunately. And when you're literally judged on this in your practical exams. Part of passing those exams is about showing yourself to be confident. And I really had this strong feeling, and the message that was drilled into us is that if you show any weakness and show any signs that uh, you personally are failing, then that could call your professionalism into question, and you could be put in front of the GMC, the General Medical Council, to judge whether you're fit to practice. And realistically, that probably would have never happened to me. And I've never heard of anyone be put in front of the GMC for, struggling with their mental or physical health. But it was more that that was how I felt inside, as this kind of baby doctor, this newly qualified doctor. Um, and one of the big things about burnout is that it really knocks your confidence, and so you compare yourself to your peers. And what I saw as I looked around me before I'd spoken up was everybody coping, everybody turning up to work with a smile on their face, looking neatly presented, and doing the job, and staying late to do overtime with a smile on their face. And I assumed wrongly that everybody was fine. If you'd looked at me at that time, you would have seen me doing exactly the same, turning up with the smile on my face, performing, doing well, going home. There was actually nothing to suggest outwardly that I was struggling if you'd looked at me at work. Um, so that was really why I didn't speak up. And you asked about what my lowest point was. I mean, as you said, that I could think of several, but I think the one that really stands out to me the most was a moment where I had done a series of night shifts, and I'd asked my hospital for a day off work, a Saturday, for one of my best friend's weddings, and they had basically denied my request, and they'd given me not only they'd given me night shifts up until the Saturday morning. So I'd asked to have the Saturday off, and I'd been put to work until Saturday at 8 a.m. So I'd worked 8 hours of Saturday, technically from midnight till 8 a.m., but in the hospital's eyes that was a day off. um, and there was no opportunity for me to swap that shift. And I drove from that shift the 3 hours to my friend's wedding. And I remember being there with having had no sleep. Um, I hadn't even had time to wash my hair. And I was so exhausted that I remember being talking to the other wedding guests, and there were people there that I hadn't seen in years. And, when you're making small talk with people, and there were some of my best friends there, and I couldn't hold a conversation. I couldn't think about anything other than work. I was thinking about my patients from the night before. I was thinking about whether I'd documented things. I was thinking about whether I'd had the right conversations with the right people, just generally questioning myself. And I went into panic mode. And halfway through a conversation with a particular, just somebody I hadn't seen in a few years, I just had to walk away, and I went to the toilets at the wedding, locked myself in the toilet cubicle, and just broke down in tears, thinking, I can't even socialize anymore. What the hell am I doing with my life? This has broken me. That was the real low point for me. And I think people probably thought I was drunk. I hadn't touched a drop of alcohol. But when people have these kind of emotional moments, and of course I wanted to hide the fact that I was struggling, and try and enjoy the day, and not let my friends see that I was having a tough day or anything like that. So it was just a really, really tough day. It was meant to be a fun, enjoyable experience, and it wasn't at all.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and now I want to know when you're in that moment, because truly, and I can speak for myself and maybe many people listening, you only know you're in burnout or you're having that lowest low in hindsight, right? Like you don't know I'm having burnout and there's something I can do about it. You almost feel stuck in that hole. So what got you out and looking back to say, oh, I was in burnout and now I'm helping other people, you know. So just take us through from that lowest low to the transition, all the changes you made, and how you got yourself into, you know, basically where you are today. We'll dig deeper as you go.
Lovely, yeah. So from that moment, that moment, I don't think I realised it was my lowest low at that point, and I went on to struggle probably for another few months. Um, I continued working at that hospital for that next few months, and that was really tough. And did what I'd always done: get my head down, get on with it, push through. Then at the end of that year, I moved to another hospital, and this other hospital was a much bigger place. It had there was better staffing, there was better resources generally. It was just a better run place. Not perfect by any means, but the system worked better. And when I moved to that hospital and saw how things worked, I suddenly realized, like, oh, okay, maybe it wasn't all me. Maybe it was that I was working in a really difficult environment. And I started to learn that there are different ways to do things, and that the system I had been working in was actually quite toxic. And I carried on working full time up until the end of that second year. You know, I said about having that first 2 years as a newly qualified doctor, and I felt tired by the end of that year, but I didn't feel as broken as I did by the end of my first year. And at that point, I had a decision to make, which was, do I go into specialty training, or do I take a break? And so I decided I'm going to take a break. I'll have a 1 year break. It's kind of a natural point in the medical profession to take a bit of a gap year, I suppose. People call it an F3 year. And I became a locum doctor, which is a freelance doctor. So it's a bit like a supply teacher. You can pick up shifts where they're available. You get to have a lot more autonomy over your own hours. My plan was I'm going to do that for a year, and then I'll go into specialty training. My plan was to become an emergency medicine specialist, an A&E doctor. I was locuming, freelancing in the emergency department, and I was enjoying that autonomy so much that 1 year of freelancing led to 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And before I knew it, I was basically just a long term, we call it a long term locum. And within that time, I took some periods of time off to go traveling. I had lots of holidays. I had lots of time to socialize. I had time to spend at home. Because I was picking my own hours, I wasn't I wasn't beholden to a rota. I was no longer missing family events. I was no longer exhausted and having to turn up to weddings after night shifts. I was able to actually enjoy my life a bit more. And so that naturally led to me recovering from this burnout. The thing that comes with that sounds really probably quite nice to an outsider, but the thing that anyone who's listening who isn't medical will probably realize, or probably won't realize, is that from within the profession, there's a lot of stigma attached to that. You're expected, as with a lot of professions, to climb the ladder, follow the straight and narrow path, do not deviate. If you dare to have a year out, it should only be a year. Otherwise, what on earth is your CV going to look like? So, to people outside of medicine, to my family, to my friends, things seemed great, and it seemed like Sarah's happier now. But I had this sort of turmoil where I was thinking, shouldn't I be climbing the ladder now? Shouldn't I be doing specialist training? But every time that application opened for the next year, I thought, just one more year. And it was at that point, maybe in about I don't know, year 4 or 5 of me doing this, where I thought, if I'm really not keen to apply to specialty training, am I still keen on continuing this career? And I looked at my bosses and I thought, do I want their jobs? And I had a bit of a sense of horror when I thought about doing their jobs. I actually realized I don't want the job of the top bosses, and that would be what I'm working towards. So what do I want? And I had to do a lot of introspection to figure out what I really wanted. I'd done a bit of life coaching. I'd got really into listening to this life coach podcast. It was a fantastic podcast. It had really helped me when I was going through a low patch, when I was burnt out. And I started thinking, oh, maybe coaching could be something that would be great for me to do. Never really thought that it would be, I would end up leaving the medical profession to do it. Um, but I created point I haven't told you about this, and I know you know this, Candice, but your listeners and followers may not know, is that I have a YouTube channel, and I'd been making YouTube content for a little while whilst being a doctor. And I started making a few videos about some of the things I had been learning through coaching and this kind of self-development content. And I was getting loads of comments from people saying, oh, this is really interesting. Can you make more content about this stuff? And I thought, okay, why don't I make an online course? So I made an online course. It was a bit of a flop. Poured my heart and soul into it, as we do with these kind of first products that we make. And I think 10 people signed up to it. And I turned that, the people did the program, and I decided that the feedback I got was that the program was great, but people wanted to be taught by me rather than it being pre-recorded sessions. So for each of the people that signed up, I offered them some one-to-one sessions with me. They all signed up, and I that was my first taste of coaching. I hadn't qualified by that point. I was just teaching them the stuff from the program, and they were getting good results. And then as I shared more of that on YouTube, more people started asking me, well, how did you recover from burnout? I want to do what you've done. And things started to naturally progress towards me helping people recover from burnout. So I followed that thread. I did lots of training to become a life coach. I mean, you don't need to do lots, but I put myself through a couple of different programs, and it just progressed on from there. And I got to a point where um, I was doing half coaching, half doctor work, and very long story short, in the end, I decided that I'm just going to phase out the doctor work, see how I feel about doing the coaching full time, and here I am.
Mm. Was that very first program on burnout for the?
No,
No, okay.
that very first program, it was called Click Into Place, and it was about helping you to find your life purpose and what you feel the most drawn towards, and how to become more confident.
Okay. So it was okay. And then you had the 10 people, you did the coaching, and then I suppose, what am I thinking? It's you discovered how your purpose actually through that. So, and that's why I wanted to ask you that question, because I was like, I think I remember this. You found your purpose through doing that work in the first place. Yes.
Kind
Okay.
of ironic, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. All right.
Mm,
And then the burnout work.
yeah.
Did you know that's what you wanted to do, or where you like, or let me ask the question differently. How did you know that that was what you wanted to help people through?
Mm, I didn't at first. I really
Okay.
didn't. I knew I
Mm.
wanted to help people, and I love talking to people. My favorite thing about being a doctor was talking to patients. I love connecting
Mm.
with people. I love understanding people's viewpoints. I love hearing about people's life stories and understanding how people tick and how they connect with their friends and family. I just loved chatting to people, really. And so when I started doing this coaching or teaching, I suppose it was initially, um, I, I, I felt really, just like you said to me at the start of this call about doing this podcast. I felt so energized by the conversations I was having with people, and I was like, oh, I want more of this. And so I kept my niche very, very broad to begin with, and I was just saying to people, if you want help with getting more confident, and if you want help with finding your life purpose, I can help. And I had those initial 10 people, and then I had like the odd person who was interested. I was offering initial free calls, and then people might sign up for a few more with me. Um, and then I realized that there is this need in healthcare. I had a few healthcare professionals coming to me saying, I want to find my life purpose, and all the work you're doing sounds really great, but I'm so broken that I can't even think broadly enough to even consider what my life purpose is at the moment. My goal at the moment is to get through the day. My goal at the moment is to get through the week. And I was like, oh, I remember that.
Mhm.
And people started to ask me how I had recovered from that period of my life. And so I dug into what had helped me, and I started coming up with some things that were helpful for me personally. And then I got really interested, probably the medical side of me, in the evidence base of what actually works, not just for me as an individual, anecdotally, but what works for large cohorts of people with burnout recovery. So I started reading very deeply about all of these techniques and strategies to help people, and then felt quite well equipped to be able to help people with burnout recovery. And I've niched down now to helping healthcare professionals in particular.
Mm. Yeah, so needed. I absolutely love your work. I know quite a
Thank
few
you.
doctors, and every single one of them needs you in their life. So yeah, I absolutely love that. And now, so looking back over this whole journey, hard times, your I don't know. I feel like you had some light moments, like, oh, this is energizing me. This is where I want to go. So my question to you is, what are we not speaking enough about when it comes to building this career that you love, that you're proud of, that you want to show up for? Because I'm a person that I love, like I cannot wait to work. I love my work. I want everyone to feel like this. So what, in your opinion, are we not speaking enough about when it comes to building that?
I think this is such a beautiful question, and I love that you ask this. The thing that I think we're not speaking enough about is adding more joy into our day to day lives. So when I worked in the emergency department, I loved working in the emergency department. By the way, as that freelance doctor that I did for several years, um, there was it's a really serious place to work. The department I worked in was the busiest trauma center in the whole of Europe, and it was busy. It was full on. There was a lot of trauma that we saw. So as you can imagine, it's a bit of a heavy environment to be in at times. You're dealing with, when people come to the emergency department, they're having generally the worst day of their life, and so you're there to kind of lift and support them. What I realized from my the amazing team that works there is that even in the darkest days, even in the heaviest moments, there are little pockets of joy that we can have. There are little things that we can do to lift each other up as humans, colleagues, you know, staff. Things like helping each other with a small task, um, offering to buy your colleagues a drink, or making light of a small moment, adding little bits of humour into our day. I think we get so bogged down with this idea that I spoke about earlier, which is about professionalism, proving yourself, showing up and showing that you're the best. And when we get so clouded by that, and by the heaviness of maybe corporate life, professional life, life becomes a slog. If you can see the lightness and joy in every day, you're winning at life. You become free.
Mhm.
One of the ways I used to do this and try to add a bit more joy into my day was listening to what I call my hype girl playlist on my way into work. It's like a 10-minute walk from where I parked my car to getting into the entrance of the hospital. So I'd have this music playing that would like get me into a really good mood. I'd walk in with a big smile on my face, genuinely happy to be at work, genuinely happy to see people, help as many people as I could. And I think that joy and that positivity, not that you can be like that every day, but that radiates out and it has a big effect on our colleagues and patients. We don't have to be so serious.
Yes. Oh, and I love that. And that has taken me a long time to learn. I think in my first bit of my career, I was definitely the hype girl. And now I actually have a playlist that I've shared with my team called my company TDN, just the initial TDN vibes. And I'm like, these are the
Oh,
vibes.
love it.
So, but yes, I spent many years taking myself way too seriously and not finding the joy because things are serious. And yeah, so I love that. I feel like if we can find those moments, a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there, oh yeah, it makes all the difference. I love that advice. All right. Well, Sarah, I feel like I can chat with you all day, literally. Like I just want to dig deeper into your story constantly. I'm like, oh, let's go into that. All right. But before I ask the closing question, I do want to ask you, is there anything else that is a highlight or something that you want to speak about before we go back to your younger you to thank yourself?
I, I think the thing that I really want to highlight is, and I don't know if this is really advice or just me reflecting, um, is to think about your support network and to think about who's around you that you can open up to, even good times and bad times. We are a social species, and it's very, with that whole professionalism thing and like trying to prove yourself,
Mhm.
we become a bit inward facing, and we are so focused on how we appear to others, how we're perceived by others, and trying to prove things to ourselves. Um, and actually, if you can just relax that a little bit and think about our think about opening up to colleagues, think about opening up to friends and family, and leaning on your support network more, life definitely becomes a lot easier.
Yes, yes. Yeah, as a business owner now, I feel like I just want to surround myself with coaches and people helping me and asking for help. And but again, that's taken me so long to get here. So yeah, excellent, excellent advice. All right, let's wrap up. Go all the way back to young you. Well, final question before we tell people where they can work with you, how they can work with you. But anyway, so final question. Young Sarah, what would you thank yourself for doing then?
Oh, well, I would thank young Sarah for trusting her guts and not always doing the conventional things, not necessarily following the straight and narrow path. It's easy to try to live up to what you think other people's expectations are, whether they are actually spoken or silent expectations. But if you can listen to your own intuition, tune into your gut feeling about what you want next and what you want down the line, you will probably have a much more fulfilling experience in your career and life in general. So, even if that means not climbing the career ladder in the way that you're quote unquote supposed to, do what feels the most right to you.
I love that. I feel so many people feel like there's a path, and truly this ebbs and flows with me still to this day. It's like, oh, everyone's doing it this way, so let me do it this way. But I just know in my heart like it's not right. And but I sometimes I've done it anyway, and then you think, no, I was right all along. So I love that advice. Yes, well, I love that. looking back and thanking yourself for going with your gut. And I mean, yeah, taking the 4 or 5 years as the, what's it, locum, I think you said, yeah. I mean, and I can understand that, like, oh, you almost feel like you're a dropout at that, during that time, like you're not doing what you're supposed to do, but it's exactly the right thing for you. So I love that. All right, let's wrap up. Tell everyone how they can work with you, who should work with you, all the good stuff.
Thank you. Well, I do mainly coach healthcare professionals, but I do have lots of programs and courses that are standalone, self guided courses that anyone can do. And if anybody would like to experience my work for free, you can sign up to my Switch Off Masterclass, which is where I teach you the 4 steps to stop overthinking about work all the time and actually switch off and enjoy the free time that you deserve. So you can access that by going to www.sarahnichols.co.uk/switch off. And otherwise, you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Sarah Nicholls or on YouTube with the same name.
I will add all the links, and I am going to download that immediately because
Oh, I hope you enjoy
that is
it.
something that I find so hard. I do work from home and I have an office door, and I'm trying to just leave the office and I close the door behind me to try and just make that switch. So, yes, I'm downloading that
That's hard.
immediately.
I hope
Thank
it's
you,
helpful.
Sarah. This has
Thank you so
been
much for having me, Candice. It's
wonderful.
been a joy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story with us. It's been amazing, truly.